All right, Verdaccio, you requested a video on Wittgenstein's theory of color, a philosophical video. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to do this video. I owe a general apology to many people because I'm real behind in making videos that I told people I would make. So my first apology goes to you, Verdaccio. Yes, this book here, Ludwig Wittgenstein, Remarks on Color, is a fascinating book. You know, Wittgenstein only published a couple of works in his life, one book and I think a small piece, a tractise or treatise of some sort. So only a couple of things. And the rest of the published material actually comes from his notebooks. He kept a lot of notebooks, and his literary executors, after his death, published sections of the notebook and gathered together. I understand many things were just written on notes. They had to gather a lot of stuff together. So anyway, Remarks on Color are his thoughts in his notebooks. So what I best like about this, well, not what I best like about it, but what I really like about it is you see, since you're reading his notebooks, you see an original mind at work. He had a very original mind, and you get to watch this original mind approach a problem and then follow a train of thought as he approaches a problem, lets go of the train of thought, picks up from an entirely different approach and approaches a solution to the same problem, and then tries another direction and another direction. Just remarkable to read. Now, he doesn't really have a theory of color. He talks in the book about Goethe's theory of color, and I'm unfamiliar with Goethe's theory of color. I haven't studied that. But there's a paragraph in Wittgenstein's book where he says that he is looking for the logic of colors. Which is a very interesting remark. He's not really looking for a theory. He's looking for the logic of colors. And if that can be discovered, or that can be found, then actually it will accomplish all the same things as an actual theory of color would accomplish. So it's a remarkable sort of comment that one can contemplate, you know, for hours or days or what have you, on and off intermittently forever. So how would colors have a logic? And I've touched on this in other videos. I've talked about this in other videos. One of the problems he keeps returning to is, why can he not imagine visually a transparent white? We can imagine a transparent green, a green glass that you can see through. Clear, transparent green glass, blue glass, red glass, but when we get to a white glass, he wasn't able to visualize that, and I'm unable to visualize it too. Now, in the videos where I've mentioned this, people will generally type in the comments that that in software there is something called white, and that you can set the transparency to 0, but I don't think that's really that's interesting, and I'd like to try that as an exercise. But I don't think it's the same thing. You know, you're going with software, and they have a thing they call transparency, and you can set it to 0, but that isn't necessarily make it a true white or a true transparency. Generally, when I try to visualize transparent white, I end up with something sort of foggy or smoky or grainy. I don't get a clear transparent white. It's just I don't want to say psychologically, but in terms of visualization, white is opaque. You know, black is opaque too, but I think of black as having great depth, you know, as opposed to white really seems to be a barrier, you know, a barrier to vision, whereas black is sort of inviting. But now we get into the sort of emotional nuances of words, and so we're off the track of trying to search for a logic. In any event, in the book, he starts to talk about, well, what is the perception of color? The fact that surfaces, there are actually many colors. If I look at say a brown desk, and I say, yes, that desk is brown, but I take a closer look, I see that actually there are many different colors on it, and many different shades of brown. So what do we mean when we say, you know, that a table is brown or any other color? He deals a lot in language games. Language games, that's a concept that Wittgenstein originated. He had a great impact on linguistics as well as the area of philosophy and mathematics and several other areas. But the concept of language games, in other words, if I'm colorblind, what my use of language, how does my use of language would differ when it comes to talking about colors than someone who is not colorblind. There are certain things I could not understand or would not understand. There are certain uses of the language that I would not be able to learn, you know, because I would not see certain colors, or I would not see certain colors in the way that other people could, and they could basically learn to use certain language constructions that I couldn't learn to use. So it's very, very interesting. He also then talks about luminosity, transparency. I kind of blended those two words together. Luminescency that's an interesting idea, huh? Luminescency. And just what it is that we're looking at now. He clearly states he's not looking for a physical or a physics explanation of what color is. He's not looking for a psychological explanation of what color is. He just wants to do with the color concepts and the properties of, I assume, of trying to visualize them. He talks about looking at a black and white photo and yet somehow knowing what colors are. You know, how when you look at a black and white photo, how can you tell? How do you know that someone's hair is brown or blonde or what have you? But we seem to know that. And it's all just shades of silver or shades of gray. He talks about properties of gray. But as I say, the most fascinating thing for me about the book is to watch an original mind approach a problem or a question. And by the way, much of it is written in the form of questions. I think Wittgenstein made a comment somewhere that a perfectly good philosophy book could be written just in the form of questions. No statements, just questions. And he has a great deal of questions he asks. And you see him pick the problem up, try an approach, drop that approach when it sort of stops working. Try a new approach. Now, for me, reading this book, I had... Mainly when I think of the imagination, I have always just sort of thought of the visual imagination, and I've always thought, well, you know, things can be visualized, the imagination can visualize anything. When I discovered that I cannot visualize a transparent white, it came as quite a surprise to me. I mean, suddenly I started to think, okay, there are limitations on my visual imagination. So, are those, I mean, is my visual imagination limited by nature? You know, limited to what nature? Is it part of nature, essentially? So that, you know, I of course can disassemble things and add them together, like I can imagine a centaur that's part horse, part human. But can I ever really originate something, or am I just simply assembling things in my visual imagination? However, the concept, so I cannot visualize transparent white. However, the concept transparent white, I understand when I read it. I mean, I'm talking about it right now. I've been analyzing and thinking about it. Why can't I do it? I obviously understand what it means. So there is something about language and the linguistic or lingual imagination, the linguistic imagination, the verbal imagination based on word that is more encompassing than the visual imagination. So I think this has many, many implications as to poetry and the power of poetry to evoke and to say things. You know, we also have things like music, which is nonverbal. You know, we can talk about the musical imagination. And then we can wonder with words, are words really bound by nature, or do words transcend nature? Because we can, in words, I think we can actually go, I'd have to think more about this, but go beyond nature. I think it has religious implications when we talk, when you reach theologies that talk about the creative word of God, you know, of creation as being basically language or a linguistic action. So there are possible religious implications to it too, if you accept one of those one of the religious systems that views language this way or views creation this way. So all in all, I really recommend the book, especially if you want to watch an original mind doing problem solving and asking questions. Just great. And I'm out of time. Verdaccio. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon. Bye.